The difference between texting, talking, being cool, nigga. Y'all did not used to talk to me. Stop saying that. Niggas didn't even used to text me. Is y'all cool? Like, stop saying that. Stop saying that. I never used to talk to you niggas.
Everybody say she was the key. And I didn't realize how much this city loves my daughter. I've been getting calls all over. Vegas, Detroit, St. Louis, just New York. And I didn't realize my baby had an impact.
Dozens of witnesses, one shooter, 0 arrests. That's where the Kierra McGee case stands right now. And the more you look at those numbers, the less they add up. Today we're going back into her murder, because the deeper you look at this case, the stranger that silence becomes. Quick ask before we get into it. If you're back here for round 2 on this case, that tells me you want to see it solved as much as I do. So do me a favor, hit like, drop a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis and turn on notifications. It costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps push this case in front of more eyes. Now let's get back into it. Let's start with the timeline, because laying it out in order is where those numbers actually start to take shape, and where the first real questions start to surface. It was early Sunday morning, August 2nd, 2026. Officers were called to the area of Van Brunt and Independence Avenue just before 4 a.m. after reports of a shooting. That's the official time on record, not sometime that night, not in the early morning hours in some vague sense, just before 4 a.m. Here's something that doesn't get enough attention when this case is discussed. A Jackson County Sheriff's deputy happened to be nearby when the gunfire started, not dispatched, not responding to a call, just physically close enough to hear it happen in real time. That deputy got to the scene before other first responders did. Think about what that means. Law enforcement was essentially arriving as the incident was still unfolding, or in its immediate aftermath, faster than a 911 call could have been placed and processed. And even with that kind of response time, even with someone that close, nobody has been arrested. When officers arrived, they found Kierra unresponsive in the parking lot of an O'Reilly Auto Parts store. EMS was called to the scene. She was pronounced deceased. Kansas City police said their initial investigation indicates she had been in that parking lot with an unknown number of other people when one or more suspects began shooting. I want you to notice that language again, because it's official police wording, not my interpretation. One or more suspects. Days after the shooting, with a deputy who arrived almost instantly, investigators still hadn't narrowed that down publicly to a single person. Detectives believe as many as a few dozen people were present when the shots were fired. A few dozen, in a parking lot, at 4 in the morning. That's not a stray passerby catching a glimpse from a distance. That's a group of people who were close enough to see, hear, and likely know exactly what triggered the gunfire. And according to police, they are still looking to talk to anyone who heard or saw something. Still looking, days later, with dozens of potential witnesses. Does that strike you as unusual? A few dozen people, a police response measured in seconds rather than minutes, and still, no suspect information has been released. That gap between how many people were there and how little has been said publicly is really where this case starts to get uncomfortable. And it's exactly where we're picking things up. Because in most cases with this many people present, you'd expect at least a partial description to leak out within a day or two, even informally. The fact that nothing concrete has surfaced publicly days later tells us this case is more complicated than the basic facts suggest on the surface. So why would a crowd that large stay this quiet? Let's actually break that down, because it's the central mystery of this entire case right now, and there isn't just one obvious answer. The most straightforward explanation is fear. If you were standing in that parking lot when shots rang out and you saw who pulled the trigger, coming forward means putting your name on a homicide investigation involving someone who has already shown they're willing to shoot in a crowd. That's not a small ask. In cities dealing with high rates of gun violence, this pattern shows up again and again. People know things. They just don't say them. Not because they don't care, but because speaking up can feel like it puts a target on their own back. Detectives publicly saying they still need witnesses to come forward tells us this fear factor is very likely part of what's happening here, even though no one has confirmed that explicitly. Think about the position those dozens of people are in right now. Whatever happened in that parking lot, they were close enough to it that police still consider them potential sources of critical information, days after the fact. That's not a passive detail. That's investigators openly saying the answer to this case is probably already sitting in someone's memory, maybe in someone's phone, and it just hasn't reached them yet. And that raises another question worth asking out loud. Is it fear of the shooter specifically, or is it a broader hesitation people in certain neighborhoods have about engaging with police at all, regardless of who's involved? We don't know the answer, and it's important we don't pretend we do. But it's a distinction that matters because the reasons people stay silent shape how an investigation like this eventually gets solved, if it gets solved at all. Then there's the possibility of simple chaos. When gunfire erupts in a crowd, people don't calmly observe what's happening. They run, they duck, they pull out their phones, or they drop them and scatter. In that kind of moment, most people aren't tracking details clearly enough to give police something usable. Someone might remember a jacket, a direction, a sound, but not a face. Multiply that uncertainty across dozens of people, and you can end up with a lot of witnesses who technically saw something, but nothing concrete enough to build a case around. And there's a practical side to this too. A dark parking lot at 4 a.m. isn't exactly ideal conditions for reliable eyewitness accounts to begin with. Add gunfire, panic, and people who may have been arriving from elsewhere in the night, possibly not in the clearest headspace, and you start to understand why investigators are leaning so heavily on physical evidence and surveillance footage alongside witness statements. Police have said they searched the area for surveillance video while processing the scene. Whether any camera actually captured the moment shots were fired, whether it was clear enough to identify anyone, and whether it's led investigators anywhere, hasn't been made public. That's another gap in the timeline we simply can't fill in with anything other than speculation, so we won't pretend otherwise. A third theory, and I want to stress this is still just a theory, is that Kierra wasn't necessarily the person the shooter was aiming for. In cases involving crowded, chaotic scenes, it's not unusual for someone to be caught in gunfire meant for somebody else entirely. Nothing in the official reporting has confirmed that this is what happened here. But it's a pattern true crime cases like this one raise often enough that it has to be part of the conversation. What do you think? Does a shooting like this, in a packed lot, in the pitch dark, feel more like it was aimed specifically at Kierra? Or does it feel like she was caught in the middle of something bigger than her? There's also the matter of her family's account of that night, which adds another layer worth sitting with. According to her parents, Kierra was on her way to a friend's birthday party when she was caught in the gunfire. Her mother, Belinda, had spoken with her just hours earlier over FaceTime. Kierra was excited, showing off her outfit, telling her mom she was headed out to celebrate with a friend. That detail matters because it tells us this wasn't someone already embedded in a volatile situation when the night began. She was on her way somewhere. Whether that destination and the parking lot where she died were connected, or whether she simply ended up in the wrong place during someone else's conflict, is still an open question police haven't answered publicly. It's worth pausing on just how ordinary that FaceTime call was. A daughter excitedly showing her mom an outfit before a night out is about as normal and unremarkable as a moment can get. There's no warning sign in it, no indication anything was wrong, nothing that, in hindsight, points to danger. That's often one of the hardest parts of cases like this for families and for viewers to sit with. There wasn't a red flag. There wasn't a moment where, looking back, someone could have said something felt off. It was a regular Saturday night that turned into a homicide investigation within a matter of hours, and that gap between the mundane and the tragic is part of what makes this case resonate with so many people who've never met Kierra or her family. Her mother has also said that when she arrived at the scene herself, she didn't see an ambulance present, and didn't see one the whole time she was there. We should be careful with this detail. Grieving family members recalling a chaotic scene aren't always going to have a timeline that matches official records exactly, and there could be a straightforward explanation investigators simply haven't laid out publicly. But it's the kind of thing a mother remembers, and it's the kind of thing that, fair or not, adds another unanswered question to a case that already has plenty of them. Community reaction to this case has been loud, and it hasn't been quiet about demanding accountability. Rosalind Temple, a longtime advocate with the group Mothers in Charge, has spent close to 17 years responding to homicide scenes across Kansas City, work she began after her own son's case went unsolved. She spoke out after Kierra's death, and she didn't hold back. She pointed to numbers showing that arguments are currently the leading factor behind homicides in Kansas City, accounting for 37 of the city's 75 homicides so far in 2026. Then she addressed whoever was responsible directly, saying the community knows who they are and giving a blunt ultimatum to turn themselves in. That's not a police statement. That's a grieving community's advocate, speaking with the kind of urgency that tells you people are watching this case closely, even if the official investigation hasn't produced a name yet. It also tells you something important about the broader picture in Kansas City this year. Kierra's death didn't happen in isolation. It happened during a period community leaders have openly described as unusually violent, with multiple homicides reported within days of each other. It's worth sitting with what Temple said just a little longer, because there's a tension in it that's easy to miss on first listen. On one hand, she's pointing to a statistic, arguments driving well over a third of this year's homicides. That suggests a pattern of impulsive, in-the-moment violence rather than premeditated, carefully planned killings. On the other hand, she's speaking to whoever was responsible, as though the community already has a fairly good idea of who that is, which suggests word may be circulating on the ground, even if it hasn't reached investigators or hasn't been confirmed publicly. Those two things, an impulsive argument-driven shooting and a community that already suspects who's responsible, aren't necessarily contradictory. But they do raise the question of just how much unofficial knowledge exists in Kansas City right now that simply hasn't crossed over into an actual arrest. So let's bring this back to what we actually know, separate from everything we don't. We know Kierra McGee was shot and killed in a parking lot just before 4 in the morning on August 2nd. We know a sheriff's deputy was close enough to respond almost instantly. We know a few dozen people were reportedly present. We know police still haven't released a suspect description, a motive, or made an arrest. We know her family says she was simply on her way to celebrate with a friend that night. What we don't know is arguably more important. We don't know why the shooting happened. We don't know if Kierra was targeted or caught in something that had nothing to do with her. We don't know why so many potential witnesses haven't come forward, whether that's fear, confusion, or something else entirely. And we don't know if the kind of dispute Rosalind Temple referenced, the kind that's fueling more than a third of this year's homicides in Kansas City, was somehow connected to what happened that night. Could investigators be sitting on more information than they've made public, deliberately holding details back to protect the integrity of the case? It's possible. It's also possible they simply don't have enough yet to move forward. Either way, the silence from that parking lot full of people is the loudest unanswered question in this entire investigation. It's also worth remembering that investigations like this one rarely move in a straight line. Sometimes a case sits quiet for weeks, with no visible progress from the outside, and then a single tip, a piece of surveillance footage, or a witness who finally decides to talk changes everything within days. There's no way to predict which direction this one goes. What we can say with confidence is that the fundamentals of a solvable case are there. A specific time, a specific location, a crowd of people who were close enough to see something. That's more than a lot of cold cases ever start with. And it's part of why this one continues to generate so much attention and discussion, both here in Kansas City and among people following it from far outside the city entirely. If you know anything about what happened to Kierra McGee that night, Kansas City police are asking you to reach out to homicide detectives directly or contact the TIPS hotline anonymously. Somewhere among those dozens of people who were standing in that lot is the detail that finally moves this case forward. I want to hear from you again on this one. Do you think this was random? Or do you think Kierra was specifically targeted? And why do you think, with so many witnesses, nobody has come forward yet? Let me know respectfully in the comments below. If you found this analysis informative, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis, and turn on notifications so you never miss another investigation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.